Hello, welcome to CGTN. I'm Zhang He, correspondent here based in the UK. And today I'm at the King's College, Cambridge. I'm going to show you the opening of a new Xu Zhimo Memorial Garden here at the King's College in Cambridge. And you can see behind me, that's the chapel of the King's College, very famous for the tourists, especially in the summer. We know that Xu Zhimo is a very famous Chinese poet that used to study here at the King's College in the 1920s. And his poem is called The Second Farewell to Cambridge. It's very famous, and a lot of the school children in China learn about it and know it very well. That's why every summer we can see that a lot of the Chinese tourists came to Cambridge to visit King's College because of Xu Zhimo, the very famous Chinese poet, because many people know about him. And today I'm going to show you what's his association with King's College. Xu Zhimo Poetry and Art Festival. We're going to meet some descendants of the Xu Zhimo family and talk to designers of the brand new Xu Zhimo Garden. And today I'm very glad to meet the chairman of the Xu Zhimo Poetry and Art Festival, Professor Alan McCone. And very nice to meet you today. And today we have it's the fourth year that we run this Xu Zhimo Poetry and Art Festival, and we have the opening of a brand new Xu Zhimo Garden today.
This is a very special occasion, not only because of the very big festival and the garden, but also all the members of Xu Zhimo's family have come from America and around the world, except for one who can't come. So we have many, many descendants of Xu Zhimo here at the festival today.
So let's enter the King's College and show some of the connection the Xu Zhimo with King's College. And Professor, tell me, for a lot of people who may not know very well about Xu Zhimo, can you tell us something about him? How important is he in Chinese poetry society and also in the Western world?
Well, many people think he is the most famous 20th century Chinese poet. Not necessarily the best Chinese poet, but very famous. This is largely because of his romantic story. He was educated in America, came to Britain, to the London School of Economics, wasn't happy there, and then he met two people who changed his life. One was a young girl who he fell in love with, and later married Zhang Shichao's son. The other was a fellow of this college, King's College, Goldsworthy Lowes Dickinson. And Dickinson was already very interested in China. He'd written a book called Letters from John Chinaman. And he'd been to China, and so he loved China. And when he met this young man who said he wasn't happy in London, could he come to Cambridge? Lowes Dickinson arranged for him to come to King's for 1.5 years as an associate of the college.
So when did Xu Zhimo stay in that building over there?
Well, when he first arrived here, he lived out in a village called Sawston with his wife. He was already married, an arranged marriage. So he lived out in Sawston, but he would come in for his teaching and to meet people here. And one of the places he spent a lot of time was in the room above the archway.
So that building is where Xu Zhimo used to study?
Yes, that's right. The archway there was Lowes Dickinson's room. So that's where Xu Zhimo used to go and have his teaching. And through Lowes Dickinson's interests, he began to learn about English poetry. And before that, he hadn't been interested in poetry. And so he met philosophers, poets, writers, all sorts of interesting people.
So a lot of the Western influence.
Well, this was his great ambition, was to take this place and Cambridge and England and the Western philosophical systems, because China had just opened up, of course. It was after the May the 4th movement and so on.
So Xu Zhimo is a quite figure person in the opening up of the Chinese poetry and art
Absolutely.
to the Western world.
He's one of the key bridges
Yes.
bringing Western culture to China and also some knowledge of China to the UK. So now, 100 years later, this is a very significant time because this is what's happening again in China. So this is the second big bridge building. It first started here in this college 100 years ago, and it's now happening again. So we're just walking under the room where Xu Zhimo was doing his teaching, just above this arch.
Oh, just above this arch is
Yeah.
where Xu Zhimo stayed. So
Yeah.
when was that? It's 1920s. So he was here between 1921
21 and 22.
22. So 1 year study,
Well, 1.5 years.
1.5 years.
And he used to walk through here, and he describes in his writings lying on the grass just over by those cows. He describes the cows as well, not these particular cows, but other cows, looking out of the window and seeing this landscape and describing those cows. And of course, he was very homesick because he'd been away from China for a long time. But the area he lived in China, Zhejiang, was very like this, willow trees and a river and trees. So this made him very homesick, but also very happy
Yes.
to feel he was in southern China.
Yes. So this way is exactly where Xu Zhimo has passed through
Yes.
King's College in
describes-
1920s.
He describes the front of this with roses growing up there.
Yeah.
He describes lying on the grass just over here.
And the boat
And the
on
boat's
the Kang
going,
River.
yeah, that's right. And this willow tree, which we're coming to now, is the famous
So
one.
that willow tree
Yeah.
is described in his very famous poem, The Second Farewell to
Right,
Cambridge.
exactly, that is the same tree,
Same tree.
because we have dated it, and it was there when Xu Zhimo came. And so he would have walked up and down here, looked at the willow tree, and then in his last 3 or 4 months, he separated from his wife and came and lived in the college. And we'll see in a minute the room where he used to live.
So Xu Zhimo used to stay in King's College in Cambridge. This English landscape
Yep.
gave him the impression, the inspiration to write his very famous poems, and also influenced the whole Chinese poetry in the
Yep.
coming years.
Well, exactly, because he fell in love with this young girl. So this was his great first love affair. He fell in love with this landscape,
Yes.
which he describes He fell in love with the landscape. He fell in love with English romantic poetry. And he made these deep friendships with painters, Roger Fry, artists and others here. So he changed his whole philosophy. And so the revolution which he created in poetry and in the relations between the East and the West is symbolized by this particular space here.
Yes, very beautiful, and I can have the feeling. I used to read the poem written by Xu Zhimo in school,
Yeah.
but at that time I can't feel, the surroundings and, the environment. You will have the feeling of the poem, have the boats on the river, and have the river, have the willow trees. So
And-
where is the willow tree exactly?
This is the willow tree which he wrote about, and he himself, I'll show you where he lived for
Yes.
4 months. Interestingly, this courtyard, he lived there in 1922, and then 14 years later, in the opposite corner, the man who invented the modern world, that is Alan Turing, who invented artificial intelligence,
Yes, computer, yeah.
he wrote his article on computing
Yes.
up in the other corner. Here is the courtyard where Xu Zhimo lived. He lived up in the top
On the top,
there.
over that window.
His window actually looked out the other way, but that's the part of his room is up there in that corner.
Yeah,
And he looked, if he were there now, he could look down on the garden,
yeah,
which we are building just across here.
yeah, exactly. So Xu Zhimo can look through the window and directly into the courtyard and he can see the river over there and the garden over there. And
The garden's just next door,
yes.
and you will be able to see his room from the garden.
Yes.
And that's where Alan Turing wrote his famous paper that started artificial intelligence and the computer.
Yes, it's
The
over
modern
there at
computer,
that
the
room.
top right. Yeah.
Top right. So they all
And
live
he writes
in this
about
co-
this
yeah.
tree as well.
Yeah, this tree. So what lines of the poem written by Xu Zhimo do you like best?
Well, I like quietly I am leaving, just as quietly as I came. And then when he says, and I shook my sleeves and took away not one piece of cloud with me,
Yeah.
which is the Mandarin
Yes.
leaving the place where the Mandarin lives.
Yeah.
And that was the final thing about the poem. When he came and wrote it in 1928, already his wife, his second wife, was very ill. China was collapsing under the attack of the Japanese
Yes.
and the warlords. So the poem is just filled with love and longing.
Yeah.
But this is exactly the spot here where he imagines himself when he writes the poem, looking across at the willow tree.
Yeah, it's exactly the place where
Yeah.
he wrote the poem. So this is the place where Xu Zhimo wrote his poem, and he just stand here and look through the grass and the chapel of King's College in Cambridge and look at the Thames River, very beautiful,
Which he said was the most beautiful in the world.
most beautiful in
And
the
these
world.
down there was Isaac Newton's college,
Yes,
Charles Darwin, many great figures were his predecessors. So he lived among these lofty, great, ambitious thinkers, and he became an ambitious thinker himself. So this is why exactly 10 years ago, we brought the stone, the Xu Zhimo stone, which is here, and then this year, we're just opening today, the garden.
so we have the garden opening this afternoon.
Yep.
And this Xu Zhimo. So before that stone was erected, so people seldom know that he passed through King's College.
Well, I am the keeper of the stone. I helped to bring the stone here. So I am the official legacy. But then we decided 3 years ago to make the first Chinese garden in Cambridge, which is opening this afternoon. But these are members of Xu Zhimo's family.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's Tony Xu.
Tony Xu.
Yeah, so let's walk into the garden and take a look at the new Xu Zhimo garden. So also about the festival this year, it's the fourth year, the Xu Zhimo Poetry and Art Festival. Has been held.
We'll go through here.
Yeah.
And the plants the male principle, the female principle, and all the plants are from Zhejiang and Haining originally. So as it grows up inside an English garden, you've got the two cultures meeting. You have UK and Britain trees here, and then you have China within it.
Well, I can see a very big yin-yang in the middle of the
That's
garden.
right,
That's
that's right.
yin-yang. So what other things could we mention about
Well,
the garden?
this is the second and third lines of his poem here. So the golden willow on the bank of the Cam stands like a bride in the sunset. Her reflections shimmer in the water and ripple in my heart. The rushes in the soft river bed sway glistening under water. I'd gladly be a river reed tossed by the current of the Cam. And the Cam is just here. And all the calligraphy here is by famous Chinese calligraphers. The first is by Mo Yan,
The first one is by Mo Yan. That one.
this one here. there's his signature here.
Yes.
So this is by Mo Yan,
Yeah.
and then by very famous artists, Buddhists, others in China.
Yeah.
And it leads through to a crescent moon bench, which is in memory of the Crescent Moon Society, which
So
he
that
started.
bench over there.
Yeah, which he started. And so this is a crescent moon bench here.
Yes.
And with the water weeds,
Yeah.
which he talks about in the poem, and the willow leaves, which he talks about, and the crescent moon you see just there.
Yes.
And these 7 pots are made with glaze. The outer, this green you see here,
Yeah.
is from ash from his tree.
Yes.
So part of his
From
tree,
the ash of the willow tree.
yes, are made into the glaze of these 7 pots around here.
Yes.
So this symbolizes the fusing together of different cultural.
In the middle, that's
Well, this is the yin, and of course within the yin there's part of the yang. So this is a black pine which grows very, very slowly. It will grow for 1,000 years.
yeah.
So if you come back in 1,000 years, not too big up there. So, and all these different plants are from different parts of southern China.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor McFarlane,
It's
the
a
chairman of the Xu Zhimo Poetry and Art Festival. Thank you very much. I'm looking
pleasure.
forward to the new garden opening this afternoon.
Okay.
And then during this festival, we also see many members of the descendants of the Xu Zhimo family come to join the festival and for this afternoon. And also today we also have the grandson of Xu Zhimo, Tony Xu. And very nice to meet you, Dr. Xu. I'm Zhang He from CGTN. We're doing a live stream on the on websites and also our apps talking about Xu Zhimo and his the grandson of Xu Zhimo. And just tell us what can you remember of your grandfather?
Actually, very little.
Very little.
Because he died, when 15 years before I was born. Right. So my journey has always been about discovering who he was through family, through friends, and so as I traveled to many of the places that he had visited and wrote poems about, it was always about discovering him. So I've read most of his poetry. I've met many people who have had encounters with him in the earlier days, and most of them have all passed away at this point. And I've visited India, I've visited Russia, I've visited Japan, many places that he had spent time, and then to try to discover, things about him that maybe have not been so obvious.
Okay, so we can have a little walk in the garden and talk about
I'm freezing. Right.
your grandfather.
Right.
And I know that you wrote a book,
Right.
Chasing the Modern,
Yes.
20 years of
Yeah,
Xu Zhimo's
right.
poetry. And so tell us, what did you find during the discovery of your grandfather?
Ladies and gentlemen, poetry reading now.
Yeah, we can continue. Yeah.
Wendy.
It's really difficult. I think they're going to be loud here. So it's difficult to pinpoint any one about some famous figure. It's really a collection of events. Maybe a few highlights. One highlight is that he had created, in cooperation with Ling Shihua,
Yes.
right? He had created a scroll. This scroll is a very famous scroll, which I think had maybe about 30 famous philosophers, artists, both from the East and the West. And so I think that scroll is called the Friendship Scroll, and he brought a blank scroll from China, I think in 1924, on his second journey to Europe and to England, and he brought that scroll and had different luminaries, scholars sign that scroll. And then that scroll, lasted well beyond when he died. And Ling Shuhua continued to add more and more artists and poets to write on it. So there are Western artists and poets, and they're Chinese, and maybe even a Japanese. And he brought the scroll both to England as well as to Europe.
So I know you have the book, and I just want to know how many members of how big is the Xu Zhimo family at the moment, and is there any connections and with a lot each other, and you just appear in public?
No, well, actually at this festival, there's about 20 of us here. So
20 of you.
the Xu family, right? So my three sisters, their families, and their descendants of that family all came here for this special event because it's a fairly major, occasion, we have extended beyond because both Xu Zhimo and Zhang Yuyi's family are, have different, branches of the family. There are more branches on Zhang Yuyi's side than there is on the Xu Zhimo side. And so we try to maintain contact. But I think Xu Zhimo's family is not quite as significant or large.
So can you tell us how big interest is in Western world? They are interested about Xu Zhimo and his poetry. Because we know Xu Zhimo is very famous in
Right,
China.
yeah.
And how about the Western world? Because I know that you live in the United States.
Right.
And how about the Western world? How do they know about
Yeah.
Xu Zhimo?
So this is a dilemma. The dilemma is that he's so well known in the China, but he's not so well known in the West. But I think this is a gradual process. Cambridge certainly has played a very important element in making him better known. My writing the book in English in 2016, or the end of 2016, is an attempt to make him better known in Western circles. I think more and more he's beginning to, being recognized in the West. I think scholars of literature know him, right? But once you start going into the common person, he is not well known. And so there are many, many ways one could try to expand that knowledge about him.
Okay, thank you very much.
By the way, just to continue that thought, the challenge, in promoting a book in China versus the challenge of promoting a book in the West is the same experience that you're asking about, right? In other words, how do you make somebody who's relatively unknown in the West better known? Where in China, everybody knows him, and they want to know what's not so, public from prior books. And so that was the challenge that I had.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Dr. Xu, and
Thank
we're
you.
looking forward to the event in the coming 2 days.
Okay.
Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
And this is the grandson of Xu Zhimo, and 20 of Xu Zhimo's family members just come to Cambridge to participate in this year's Xu Zhimo Poetry and Art Festival. And what we are going to show you is the Xu Zhimo Garden. And now there is a poetry reading is taking place in the garden, and we can take you into the garden and have a look. The festival, we have a lot of events, including exhibitions. We have a Cambridge of the poetry readings like this.
By raucous boss, ubiquitous. Our my lays. So Itis bird in month of May doth sing, and stops its larynx in maturing days. I do think August's just as joyful now, without that side bird's lullaby at night, but its wild music loads too many a bough, and joys too common, cloying, turn to blight. Now and again, I too may not prolong my music, not to dull you with my song.
Second Farewell to Cambridge, very famous poem written by Xu Zhimo.
Just as quietly as I came, gently I waved goodbye to the clouds in the western sky. The golden willow on the bank of the calm stands like a bride in the sunset. Her reflection simmers in the water and ripples in my heart. The rushes in the soft riverbed sway and glisten underwater. I'd gladly be a riveree, tossed by the currents of the calm. In the shadow of the elm is a pool, not of clear spring water, but a rainbow from heaven. Crushed and crumpled among the duckweed, leaving only a rainbow-like dream. Searching for a dream? Take a long pole and punt, gently back towards the greenest of green grass. In a boat brimful of starlight, singing out loud in the splendor of the starlight. I cannot sing aloud now. The flute and the panpipes of the parting have gone silent. Even the clamorous summer insects are hushed for me. Silence tonight in Cambridge. Quietly, quietly I am leaving, just as quietly as I came. Careful not to brush away with my sleeve the faintest wisp of a cloud.
And just now we just heard the poem, The Second Farewell to Cambridge, written by Chinese poet Xu Zhimo. And now we have some of Richard Barron's garden.
Yes.
And we are very honored to have you today at the Xu Zhimo Poetry and Art Festival.
Thank you very much.
And we
It's
have
a
a live stream with CGTN. So
Pleasure
we just want to know something about Xu Zhimo and his poetry. And first of all, how do you think Xu Zhimo's poetry is known in the Western world? Because we know he's very famous in China, but how about the Western world?
He's known as an important poet, but not greatly. He's known very much in Cambridge, and of course we know in Cambridge that that's one of the reasons why so many Chinese people come to Cambridge, and why Chinese people want to study in Cambridge, simply because they know the poem. They've learnt the poem in school. So the answer is he's not known as widely in English-speaking countries as in China.
But we know that this festival is try to promote Xu Zhimo because he actually acts as a bridge, a link with China and the Western literature world.
Yes.
And for me, for you, you are a British poet.
Yes.
So what are the lines that you can remember, you like best from Xu Zhimo?
Well, again, it's from this famous poem, which I call "Leaving Cambridge Again," which I have also translated. I've done a translation of it. Yes.
So what line do you like best?
The last lines, where he talks about the sleeve, brushed like a sleeve, which is very, very delicate. I also, incidentally, am acting as a kind of bridge. I don't know if that interests you, but I have written a book called Changing, and I'm going to show it to you. Now, this is my book, which is based on the I Ching. So this is the major testament in English to the I Ching in poetry. And each hexagram, each gua in the I Ching becomes a poem. I don't know if you know the I Ching, but of course it's terribly important. Now so I share with Xu Zhimo bridge between Eastern and Western culture is immensely important. This is one of the most important tasks for the 21st century.
So Xu Zhimo also gave you some influence that as a British poet, some influence of writing your
A
poem.
little bit, but not much. My main influence from China comes from the ancient Chinese classics. And of course from some of the great poets, the great Chinese poets like Li Dao and so on.
Thank you very much,
You're welcome.
Richard. Very nice to
good
meet you. And we can see the poetry reading continues at the new Xu Zhimo Garden. And this afternoon we'll have more poetry reading like this. Also we'll have the choirs from King's College, and also it will be a 2-day festival. So I think it will be a very good event to commemorate Xu Zhimo and his connection with to look at the scenes that the Xu Zhimo has while Xu Zhimo writing his poems, and I think it will be a great event that will bring a bridge between China and the Western world. So I think that's for all. The very brand new Xu Zhimo Garden in King's College, Cambridge, and hopefully many of you will have a chance to visit King's College in Cambridge and visit the garden, Xu Zhimo's garden here. Thank you very much for watching us. And it's CGTN with the opening of the Xu Zhimo Garden at King's College in Cambridge.